We don't know what will happen over any specific retirement time horizon, so it's helpful to set aside some safer assets. I would say that's probably the biggie in terms of constructing a retirement portfolio. I think many retirees are just running overly aggressive portfolios, in my opinion.
On WealthTrack, Morningstar's personal finance guru, Christine Benz, focuses on some key financial lessons for retirement.
Funding provided by Clearbridge Investments, the Fairholme Foundation, First Eagle Investments, Bill Miller, Baird, Strategas Asset Management, Research Affiliates, Royce Investment Partners, Seafarer Capital Partners, and Women Investing in Security and Education.
Hello and welcome to this edition of WealthTrack. I'm Consuelo Mack. How concerned are you about your retirement? As we reported recently, a survey published in USA Today found that 61% of Americans feared retirement more than death. And their concerns range from financial ones like the rising cost of long-term care and poor investment decisions to feeling disconnected from society and adapting new routines and lifestyles. Well, retirement is a challenging, life-changing event that we will all face if we are fortunate enough to have a long life. Luckily, on WealthTrack, we have access to some of the best minds in the retirement business, and this week's guest is one of them. She is Christine Benz, the renowned and respected longtime director of personal finance and retirement planning at Morningstar, where she writes a daily personal finance column, co-hosts the Long View podcast, and is in much demand as a public speaker and financial expert. Benz was named to Barron's inaugural list of the 100 most influential women in U.S. finance and is one of its 10 most influential women in wealth management. She has also authored several books, including the recently published How to Retire, 20 Lessons for a Happy, Successful, and Wealthy Retirement. It's a wonderful compendium of interviews with personally chosen experts on a wide array of retirement topics, both financial and non-financial. On last week's WealthTrack, which is available on wealthtrack.com, we discussed the non-financial aspects of retirement planning, including visualizing retirement, considering transitioning into it rather than going cold turkey, nurturing relationships, and housing needs. Well, this week we are going to focus on the more familiar financial aspects of retirement, from investing to spending. I asked Christine to start with investing. Why having a simple investment plan is better.
I think having a simple investment plan makes sense throughout our retirement life cycle, our pre-retirement years. Fewer moving parts is better because necessarily many of us are bringing multiple accounts into retirement. We have Roth IRAs, maybe traditional IRAs, maybe taxable assets. If you're part of a couple and you both have your own accounts, you can double those things. So inherently, we have some complexity. So within those accounts, I like the idea of having fewer moving parts, using fewer holdings to accomplish something similar to having a busier portfolio. And I think it's especially important as we age to think about reducing the ongoing oversight from that portfolio where we do have fewer holdings to keep tabs on. I often run into people who have been avid individual stock investors. Often dividend-paying stocks are a big focus of retiree portfolios. But sometimes I look at older adults' portfolios and I think, my gosh, you're running a mutual fund here, basically, because you have 100 different holdings. I think it's incumbent upon each of us as we age especially, and we know that cognitive decline it increases in incidence as we age. It's important to try to reduce our ongoing oversight responsibilities. Also bring a buddy on board in some fashion, whether it's a trusted adult child or a financial advisor, just someone who is keeping eyes on your plan. To me, that's another valuable thing to do.
Really smart. One of the first financial chapters in the book is about Social Security claiming. And with Mary Beth Franklin, one of our all-time favorites and a Social Security expert, why did you give that so much prominence?
The key reason is that I do think it's one of the linchpins to the financial aspect of retirement. The first step is, thinking about your budget, thinking about how it might change in retirement, and ideally you would look at that within, start with the first 10 years of retirement and map out your spending at a really granular level where you're looking at, okay, in year 2, I think we might need to buy a car, and in year 4, we want to take the family on this big trip, or whatever the case might be. Take it year by year for ideally the first 5 to 10 years of retirement. And then look at how your non-portfolio sources of income will help address your planned spending. So for many of us, Social Security is the only non-portfolio source of income that we'll be bringing into retirement. We won't necessarily have pensions. Some people might have rental income from rental properties. Some people might continue to work a little bit in retirement, then that's bringing in income. But for many of us, the big non-portfolio source of income is Social Security, and it's a lifetime income source. When you look at the features of Social Security, the fact that it lasts throughout our lifetimes, it is inflation adjusted in a really beautiful way that we saw during this recent bout of inflation. There's just a lot to like about Social Security. It's a safe stream of income. So enlarging our Social Security cash flows, to me, is one of the first jobs when it comes to looking at the financial aspect of your retirement.
Speaking of an income stream that lasts for life, there is a private option, which are annuities. And as you know, there are some very vocal critics advertising on TV on a regular basis who basically say, never buy an annuity. But you say not so fast. There have been changes in the annuity business. So what's your view of annuities?
Absolutely. And interestingly, there is a difference of opinion even in my book about the role of annuities, where you had people like Bill Bernstein and J.L. Collins, positively allergic to that idea. And then Michael Finca and Wade Pfau are a little more pro-annuity. It's such a broad basket that it's almost unhelpful to talk about annuities as a group, because you have very basic income annuities, which are just going to provide someone a stream of income throughout their lifetimes, no bells or whistles, generally very low cost. And then you have other products that embed various investments under the hood of the annuity and offer some insurance features. Those products can get more complicated. They can be opaque and difficult to figure out. They can be more costly. So I tend to favor the first group, where if you are looking at your anticipated spending in retirement and it looks like there will be a little bit of a shortfall in terms of what Social Security is able to provide and what you need in terms of your fixed cash flows to cover your mortgage, your utilities, your food, taxes, health care, there you might look to an annuity to help meet that shortfall, and that can help you right-size your annuity purchase. If you're aligning those fixed outlays with your fixed sources of non-portfolio income, I think that's a great approach. Some people may find that Social Security perfectly covers their fixed outlays, especially if they do wait until full retirement age or even wait until age 70. They may find that Social Security is very nicely covering their costs. For other households, they might find there's a little bit of a shortfall, and there I think an annuity can be a particularly elegant solution because it is that lifetime income. A couple of big knocks on annuities, even the good ones that I like. One is that you can't buy one that is linked to the Consumer Price Index. So you can buy an annuity that will provide you something of an inflation protection, but nothing that is CPI linked. And the other thing you need to be careful about is just you need to look at the financial wherewithal of this insurer, because this is a long-term contract for your whole lifetime. So you want to make sure that you're with a very good insurer that will have the ability to make good on its promised payments to you. So you need to do your homework. Ideally, I like the idea of getting some objective advice on whether this makes sense. Don't turn to an insurance company to ask them whether you need an annuity, because you probably will come away with an annuity. Get some objective guidance on this question.
Your specialty, this was lesson 11, was again talking about cash flow and income, structuring a portfolio for cash flow. to create income. So share some of your suggestions.
Yes, this gets back to the bucket strategy, which I've written a lot about and talked to your viewers about, Consuelo, as well. And I was so influenced to work on bucketing by talking to Harold Avensky, who is a financial planner, now retired. And his basic point was that he runs a long-term total return portfolio but then bolts on a cash bucket to cover a couple of years worth of planned portfolio withdrawals. So over here you have your total return portfolio, but you also have your living expenses set aside for the next couple of years. And he found in his work with clients, and I have subsequently found in talking to individual investors and getting feedback from them, that it was just an effective behavioral trick. That if the client had their living expenses set aside for the next couple of years, they were able to put up with the volatility that would inevitably go on with the stock bond portfolio because they knew they had their living expenses set aside. But the basic idea in my bucket setup is that we know that equities, if you have a 10-year time horizon, they're actually quite reliable, that they're reliably in positive territory. They're often in the black in something like 90% of rolling 10-year periods. But if you shrink that period, stocks are unreliable, which is why you'd want to think about building a bulwark of safer investments, cash, as well as high-quality fixed income investments. So ideally, you would build like an 8 to 10 year runway in cash and fixed income instruments. So if worst case scenario, you come into retirement and you encounter a prolonged bear market, you could pull from those safer investments first, leave the equities undisturbed. I just think it's an elegant way to visualize why you might diversify across the major asset classes, especially in retirement.
Explain why a bond ladder might be a good idea as well for a more secure, reliable investment.
Definitely. So Bill Bernstein in the book talks about the value of TIPS, Treasury Inflation Protected Securities, as a component of your retirement portfolio. It's probably not something that people really need prior to retirement, but this is an asset class that provides safety and inflation protection. And you can buy TIPS mutual funds or TIPS exchange traded funds. The nice thing about a ladder of individual TIPS bonds, even though it can get a little bit more complicated to manage, is that you are effectively setting up your cash flows for each year of retirement, and you would have this inflation adjusted cash flow stream. So I think it's a really nice tool to consider.
What are some of the common mistakes that we make in our retirement portfolios?
Well, one, I think, is using recency bias, thinking about market performance and using that to inform how we construct our portfolios. So we've had quite a strong equity market, since like 2009 with a few interruptions.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
It's been great. So many of us savers came of age in an era where the market has been really good to us. We can be reluctant to de-risk our portfolios. I encounter this all the time. And frankly, bonds haven't necessarily made a great case for themselves, right? We had 2022, for example, where bond prices declined sharply amid sharply rising interest rates. So I think a lot of retirees, pre-retirees, look at fixed income investments and really say, why bother? And the lost decade from 2000 through 2009 is really why you should bother. That we may, not saying that we're heading into this, but we don't know what will happen over any specific retirement time horizon. So it's helpful to set aside some safer assets. I would say that's probably the biggie in terms of constructing a retirement portfolio. I think many pre-retirees, retirees are just running overly aggressive portfolios, in my opinion.
You also, in How to Retire, have several chapters on spending, and I'm just going to look, how it might change, create a spending plan, give yourself permission to spend on what matters to you. Some key advice and takeaways from those chapters on spending into retirement and through retirement?
One of the key ones, Consuelo, is the value of being flexible with your spending if you can. So a lot of research from our team at Morningstar and other entities has looked at this issue of safe spending rates because it's really difficult to figure out how much you can reasonably spend throughout your retirement time horizon. And a lot of the research points to the value of if you can be flexible with those withdrawals, if you can pay attention to what's going on in your portfolio, that redounds to the benefit of a higher lifetime withdrawal rate over your whole retirement life cycle. Take less in a down year. It usually means that you can take more in a good year. And I think that comes back in part to really taking care to align your fixed sources of cash flow with your fixed spending. That gives you more flexibility to vary your withdrawals based on what's going on in your portfolio.
I hate to bring this up, but tax planning, you actually address that. And post-retirement, there are some advantages to some tax strategies in retirement.
This is a fabulous period. The post-retirement pre-required minimum distribution, often pre-Social Security in many households. So for many households, this is sort of this age 65 to 70 year period, or 73 is when required minimum distributions come online. But you can use that period to do some tax planning to potentially explore strategies like converting traditional IRAs and 401ks to Roth during that period. You may even want to accelerate withdrawals from those traditional tax-deferred accounts where you're paying full income taxes on those distributions. It's a great time to sit down with some sort of a financial advisor or tax advisor to get a little bit of strategy around where you are going for your withdrawals. Those can be the lowest tax years of retirement, so it's great to explore some of those strategies where you may actually bump up your tax bill a little bit in that period, but it'll benefit you later in retirement when your income is a bit more out of your control. When you're taking Social Security, when you're required to take those minimum distributions from your IRAs, there's less that you can control about your tax picture. In those early years of retirement, you're really in the driver's seat.
You devote, some chapters to communicating with your loved ones and leave no regrets.
I love those chapters, Consuelo. So I talked to a couple of experts. One was Cameron Huddleston, who has written a fabulous book about communicating with your children about your financial plan. She talks about sharing the outlines, at least, of your financial plan. She had to piece things together after her mom encountered dementia and her dad passed away very suddenly. And her point is, your kids are going to find out at some point, right? How you stand financially. It's better to bring them on board with at least the basic outlines of your financial plan. And then, you'd obviously want to take the next step of making sure that you have those basic estate planning documents in place. Jennifer Roselle talks about how to do that. She's an estate planning attorney who often works with older adults on their estate plan and families on their estate plans. So she talks about all of those must-have documents that you would ideally be updating. And one of my favorite conversations in the book is with Jordan Grummett, who is leading light in the financial independence retire early movement, sometimes called FIRE. But Jordan is a hospice doctor. He still works with patients regularly and had some really inspiring bits of advice about how to make sure that we don't have regrets later in life. So Jordan talked about how repairing relationships is often important for older adults, how having a sense of purpose is important, and he calls it big P purpose. So you might have something really grand that you want to do during retirement, but he also thinks it's important that we all pursue small P purpose. So it might be something like being a great parent to your children or being a great grandparent. really take a chance on things in his work, working with people who are at the latter stages of his life. He notes that some of the things they're most regretful are not the things that they tried and failed at, but rather the things that they never had the courage to try. So I felt that the conversation, even though it sounds really gloomy, this conversation with a hospice doctor, to me, it's just a terribly inspiring conversation about using this time in our lives as wisely as we possibly can.
So, Christine, any surprises for you in writing this book?
One is, and I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, but one is that people approach this in radically different ways. And that was one reason why I wanted to include Wade Pfau's discussion of how we all have our own retirement income styles, that we're all geared a little bit differently to what we want in retirement, that some people might be positively allergic to the idea of an annuity in retirement, and then other people might say, no, that's exactly what I want, is sort of that paycheck equivalent. Other people might want to retain control over their money. There was also a variation in opinion in terms of working longer, that several of the researchers I talked to pointed to the value, both financial and non-financial, of working longer. And then one of the people I talked to for the book, Fritz Gilbert, said, no, by all means, if your finances line up and you don't need to continue work, you should try your hand at doing some things that aren't work. So I liked that there's a difference of opinion, and I actually really like the message that sends, which is that you should stay open to incoming information. You know, there's a natural tendency as we age, as we process more information, our views on some of these things can calcify a little bit. We might be very firm in our opinion, but I like that the message that the book sends is that you should try to keep an open mind about some of these things. You'll change, your views may change as well.
So how did writing the book change your personal retirement plans, or did they?
Probably not. I have tended to think that for my husband and me, we will probably phase into retirement pretty gradually. I have been thinking about the idea of this alignment of Social Security plus potentially an annuity to cover our fixed cash flows. One thing the book got me thinking about is that for people like me and my husband, we've been assiduous savers. We, I think, identify as savers and investors. It's going to be a real challenge to give ourselves permission to spend from our portfolios. I don't want to be one of these people who is underspending from my portfolio. I want to give myself permission to spend, and I want to understand spending broadly, that it encompasses lifetime giving, and I want to prioritize that lifetime giving. I want to see my money working for my loved ones during my lifetime. An example I often point to is a gift that my parents gave to my husband and me when we were just starting our lives together. We were buying our first home, and I think it was my dad's first year of retirement or one of his early years of retirement, and my parents padded our down payment, and it helped a ton. And ultimately, it was a way more impactful gift for us than the money that we eventually inherited from my mom and dad when we were in our 50s. And I really take that to heart when I think about the things that I could do with my money earlier on to help my loved ones and to see my money potentially working for them. Seems to me to be a really powerful thing. And the same goes for charity as well. So I'm a big believer in lifetime giving, and working on the book has gotten me thinking more about that.
Very inspiring and very insightful. The one investment for a long-term diversified portfolio, what would you have all of us do or invest in?
You know, I'm always evangelizing about the virtue of simplifying your portfolio, reducing the moving parts. That's especially important as you embark on retirement. A really terrific one and done holding would be Vanguard Total World Stock Index. You can buy a traditional index mutual fund or an exchange traded fund. It doesn't matter which one you pursue. Very low costs. Every stock in the world is represented in this index, and it regularly rebalances, so it's just mirroring the allocation of US and non-US stocks throughout the globe. So just a great one and done holding. It might be a little bit simplified if you have a very large portfolio, but if you have a smaller account somewhere, say a small Roth IRA, it's your one-stop equity holding.
As always, Christine Benz, How to Retire is a wonderful book, and it's just chock full of great ideas and suggestions, and also reflections that certainly is helping me reflect on retirement as well. So thank you, Christine, once again for joining us on WealthTrack.
Thank you so much, Consuelo.
At the close of every Wealth Track, we try to give you one suggestion to help you build and protect your wealth over the long term. This week's is more about enjoying your life. It comes from Christine Benz at the very end of her new book, How to Retire, when she recommends finding your micro joys. So this week's action point is find your micro joys. It might be taking a walk, meeting a friend for coffee, watching the birds at your bird feeder, settling down with a good book, a glass of wine in the evening, enjoying a sunset. None of these micro joys cost very much money. They are accessible to most of us, and they can give life meaning and pleasure every day. Next week, handling unexpected risks. What personal finance master Jonathan Clements is doing in the face of a terminal illness. In this week's extra feature, what Christine Benz is considering as a sequel or companion book to How to Retire. Please follow us on Facebook, X, and our YouTube channel. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. Have a lovely weekend and make the week ahead a healthy, profitable, and productive one.